Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to chat with Megan Abbott about Dorado Drive. Megan is a Los Angeles Book Festival award-winning author, an Edgar Award-winning author, and a New York Times bestseller. She holds a PhD from NYU, and she has had articles in the New York Times, the Paris Review, and Wall Street Journal, among others. Welcome, Megan.
So happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited for you to be here as well. I was telling Megan just before we started recording, I just absolutely adore Dorado Drive. And from hearing you on other podcasts, I realized that in real life you have a brother, but in this situation, you brought us three sisters. No offense to your brother, but I'm so glad you brought us three sisters. So can you give the audience an overview of what Dorado Drive is about?
Yes, it's about three sisters. They're all, of a certain age, in their 40s. And they really grew up in, relative affluence outside of Detroit in Grosse Pointe, which is where I'm from. And now they're due to, the decline, the recession, the decline in the auto industry, et cetera. Everyone in town basically has sort of lost their money. And so the three sisters each have some kind of financial uncertainty. And one by one, they're invited to join this club called The Wheel that promises to yield great rewards. And of course, things get messy from there for all three sisters. But it wouldn't be a crime novel if it didn't.
Right. Something has to go down, or else it's just a love story. So it's I loved the whole premise of it. I know that there's some situations in the U.S. that something similar to this has happened in real life quite a few times, I gather. And then my parents were, and me as well, were in some what I now call their term multi-level marketing things.
Yes.
They're a pyramid, but with multi-level marketing, there is a product. Right. Whereas with The Wheel, there's not really a product, which I guess is maybe the thing that makes it legal or illegal.
Right. It's one of the things that definitely makes it illegal, but makes it somehow seem less so because you're not hoisting a product. You don't have to buy, $10,000 worth of a product and try to sell it. So I think it can be harder to detect what's illegal about it. But it is a pyramid scheme, as you say, and it's illegal because if you don't get it on the ground floor, you're never going to make your money. And then there are other tax issues with why it's illegal. But,
right. Yes. Anytime money is changed, even if it's under a shell, yes, somebody wants some tax money out of it.
That's right.
So why the sisters instead of brother and sister? But why sisters? What about that interested you?
Yeah, I was really interested in the way your childhood has a big impact on the way you relate to money. I think all of us, whether we felt that there was enough of it or it felt scarce, or if our parents talked about it or if no one ever talked about it. And so for these three sisters, for the first half of their life, they had wealth, they had, country clubs and a grand house, and then the money went away. So it's affected all of their ideas about money. And I think for women, especially, for everyone, but especially for women, money's never just about money, right? It's tied up with security and independence and freedom. And so with sisters, it was a way of exploring how their childhood had that impact. And then you have all the layers of sisters, that kind of petty aggressions and old grudges and loyalty and all those elements. So to sort of put their feet to the fire in this club felt like a great opportunity for all that to come forward.
I absolutely agree. And, I think that I actually had a neighbor one time who had been fairly affluent, and through a series of things with a company he owned and himself personally, he ended up losing everything and was renting an apartment next to where I lived. And he was every day 7 days a week. That's all he could talk about because money is what runs our lives, all of us. I mean, we have to have money to survive, but I think when you lose money or you lose your prominence, all of a
Yes.
sudden it gives something very, very different. And I mean, I really felt for Pam because I think Pam is sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say she's the most important sister, but she's sort of where the main story comes from is, what goes on around Pam's life. And I mean, I could feel Pam's pain.
Yes.
She's gone through a divorce, she's lost her status in life, and all these things happen. She's got a son going off to college. And so how fun was did you have a favorite sister? I know that's like asking you to pick a favorite child,
Yeah.
but still.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say Pam was always sort of the center for me because in some ways she does it, her desire is the most overwhelming because in some ways, for all the reasons you say, she really needs a win here, and has practical reasons, but she also she gives her a sense of sort of purpose for the first time. Maybe she lived under the sort of behind the shadow. She was a shadow of her husband, who was a big mover and shaker for so long. And finally, she's found something she's good at, and she can make her own money. And her sort of joy, and somehow women of a certain age aren't supposed to want things anymore, and she just wants things. And so those are the characters always that are the most fun. They're not overladen with our issues. Our sort of the other sisters have different qualms, or but not Pam. She just wants to go for it.
Which I love that. I love Pam's zeal for,
Yes.
finding something to go for, and and she was married to Demon Doug, which
Yeah.
oh my God, I just laugh every time one of them calls him Demon Doug, but it's only in their mind or out loud because I'm like, there is an ex family member that everybody's like, oh,
Yes, we
every
all have
time
a
they
demon
come
dog.
up. So poor old Doug, he got dumped on a lot, but I think deservedly so.
Yes, he was also fun to write because he's sort of unabashed too, and then I started to have very much affection for him and give him more sides to him. But he's definitely sort of the amalgam of all the all the bad exes in my past.
Well, and in a way, and I mean, this may be you may disagree with this, but in a way, I think he's also a combination of the three sisters, but maybe to the nth degree.
Yeah.
I think Doug brings enough sliminess that it's like, he's got an ick factor to him.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that the sisters, sadly, because of where they feel they are in their life, they're only a shade off of ick because
Yes.
they feel like they've got to get things moving and do things. So
Yes.
uh,
Yes. 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 Go ahead. Yeah.
so I was going to say also if I don't make a note, I will screw myself every time. Vivian.
Yes.
So I found that the parallels that you ran between Harper and Vivian, I
Yes.
really enjoyed that because I thought it was, we see a little bit of Pam through how she deals with her daughter and what's going on in Vivian's life. Was that important to you to add that little bit of extra color and layer?
Yes, I mean, I thought a lot about how generationally um, queerness has changed so much in the culture, and there's a huge gap. Harper felt that she had to basically be closeted a little bit name only, right? And so
Right.
she's of that generation, and felt like she had, she's sort of having furtive relationships, and because it's only really in this conservative town, that's not considered a real relationship. And Pam having a queer daughter of a younger generation where they're where Vivian has no desire to hide herself or who she is sort of befuddling to Pam, and therefore Harper is sort of reflecting on Vivian has this freedom she never had, which she wishes she had, and Pam's judgments on Vivian feel like judgments on herself. So it was a way to sort of complicate all those relationships and explore very real, I think, generational divide on this stuff that can be hard to bridge.
I agree, and I thought you did it so beautifully, Megan.
Thank
I thought
you.
that you as a parent, you have a very different dynamic with your child than you do with your sibling. Whether you mean to or not, it is simply the way life happens. And I think that Pam really wants the best for Vivian. I think that, bless Pam, I think she's sort of at the end of her rope with Vivian. I can understand it because Vivian is a free spirit and she's not willing to be tied down. And so, and you brought that across the page so beautifully in the fact that at no point do we not root for Vivian or Pam in their relationship.
Right.
We just see the dynamic that they go through.
That's right, and you just hope that Pam would sort of wake up to it. And in some ways, she's so focused on herself, really, for the enjoying this moment that she can't really see what she's doing to her daughter. So I think it's so good when you can have. I'm glad that Vivian has Harper as someone who's accepting and she can share her experience. And you always kind of hope for that for the Vivians of this world that have Pam as their mother.
That's right. And I think, because we want, as a reader, we want all the characters to have hope one way or another.
Yes.
We don't want them to be completely isolated, yet we do know in real life that there are people who feel completely isolated. So it was really lovely to see that dynamic between Vivian and Harper. So it was really nice. I enjoyed reading that. Thank you.
Good.
So let's talk a little bit about the money aspect scheme of it. And can you give the audience sort of like, I'm gonna ask for like a little history lesson. So can you tell the audience what the wheel is and what it does? And because that is really a great deal. I mean, the wheel is almost a secondary character.
Yes, it's true. It's true, and
it's important.
It is, and it's sort of these kind of pyramid schemes that are really kind of investment clubs are extremely common, but they, along with MLM, seem to emerge during times of economic uncertainty, and I was seeing that a lot during the pandemic. I was seeing, people trying to entice their Facebook friends, etc., to join their circle of women, or they always have these euphemistic names, and basically they involve, instead of buying products, you buy it, you put some money on the table, and the promise is you'll get 5-10 times that if you recruit new members, which is what makes it a pyramid. And I think for the wheel, I think these women really see it as they're investing in one another, right? That this is sort of, there's a lot of the language of feminism that is often deployed in the recruitment. And I think women are the primary people that become involved in, much like MLMs in these, because often women are often need to work from home. They have childcare responsibilities historically. This is how Mary Kay Cosmetics, of course, all began. But it's also, I think, targets women because women are often better at using their social networks, having social networks, extended social networks. And so what you see with these women is that this is their friends that they were in the PTA club with, or that they, organized a benefit with, or were in a sorority with. And so the women in the wheel all have to bring in a $5,000 in this case. And the promise is they'll slowly, there's these parties, and each party someone has ascended to the level where they collect the pot. And you can see the problem already going in about how that's going to work. But they always work for a while, and they always work for some people.
That's right. And look, it is the same with multi-level marketing. If you can get enough people to join, if you sell enough soap or enough supplements or whatever the commodity is, then you move up the ladder. And but what no one ever tells you on the first day of meeting, trust me, because I've been there, done that, is what happens when people under you quit. Well, you just lose your status. And so it means you've got to constantly recruit. And I think probably the cruelest thing about any of these pyramid schemes is we're having to take our friends and loved ones and try to convince them to join us and to come along with us. And it doesn't, trying to look at what that will do in the long run. Because,
Yes.
you know, if it works, supposedly everyone becomes rich, but if it doesn't work, everybody just loses their money, and somebody at the top makes a lot more money than anyone else does.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm never the first one. I'm never in the foundation. I'm always at the crest of the wave just before it hits the rocks. So it never worked for me.
I know. I feel like by the time I hear about it, it's already over.
Right?
And then no, that's exactly right. And then the recruitment, you have to keep recruiting. So you're going to be recruiting vulnerable people that can really ill afford that buy-in,
Right.
and probably don't have the extended social network to manage their own recruitment numbers. And so that's really, in the cases when these go to the level of federal indictment, which they often do, it's usually because someone is disgruntled, that didn't
Yes.
get the money, is in a bad situation, on the verge of bankruptcy, and then they go to the feds, and that's usually, that always happens, inevitably, but it's always the people that, again, it's the most vulnerable.
Sure.
It's in some ways a mirror of the stock market, right? It's the same, it's the same power structure all around.
Precisely. And I think that, the thing is, it's something that doesn't stop. You can't just rest. And I think oftentimes how people get lured into this is because they see a friend that needs a little boost. And I think it often starts, and I'm being very generous here, but I think it often starts as just simply a way of making a better life for yourself and hopefully for your friends. I mean, if you have real true friends, you don't want to leave them behind, but at the same time, we never really explore what will happen if it doesn't work, because my dad did a lot of things like multi-level marketing and stuff like that. He tried ventures. Some of them worked better than others, but no one ever goes into this saying you're going to lose your shirt. It
Right.
just doesn't happen that way. It's all about what I'm going to do for you and how I want you to join my club.
Yes, and I think it does sort of feel like what you're supposed to be doing. It's the American dream, right? And that you hustle, and that and you can that this is the way America's built, is for for you to be able to climb your way up, so to speak, to
Yeah.
success. So I think it's really, it's sort of baked in. It's hard to even step out of that and think about how much you can get hustled, until it's usually too late.
Yes, yes. And then I also think that, for the majority of us that go to work is just that, it's work. It's not pleasure and
Yes.
fun. And these groups are certainly much more geared towards lifting each other up and having a good time. I
Yep.
did do a little research, a little Googling
Yes.
research. And
Yes.
what I noticed was the number of these groups that have these metaphysical names. And as you were talking about, feminist ideas. And it's like, wow, you've taken two things that are really, really positive and you've twisted them for
Yes.
your benefits. I was like, wow.
Yes, no, it's so insidious. It uses this sort of new age language, right? And like that sort of the gift, the idea that it's manifestation, and then it uses this notion, of feminism as sort of what lets women help other women, and this is the way, men do this all the time, now this is just for us, and it feels very, sisterhood at these, there are parties in my book, but they're always parties, all MLMs as well. They're always organized around these parties to get everyone revved up, to get them on board, and so that can feel a lot like solidarity and a good feeling, and then those who exploit that feeling to take advantage of other people, even often without knowing it. I mean, I think some of these women don't know what the danger they're
Yeah,
bringing people into.
totally agree. And I think that, we all good people look for ways to empower others. I
Right.
mean, it's always good to give because it comes back to you in return. It's a great thing, but if it's done with a nefarious premise, then it doesn't work so well in the long run. Somebody's going to be burned, and probably a lot of somebody.
That's right. The math isn't mathing, as they say.
It's not. And somehow I bet you will not be the keynote speaker at this year's Amway national meeting. But, I mean, I'm sorry to tell you, Megan, but you're just not going to be the keynote speaker at Amway this year.
No, and as someone from Michigan, growing up with Amway everywhere, I feel like I got a target on my back now.
Well, I'll try to protect you as best I can since I brought it up. So you also did a lovely thing of a love story to your hometown. I mean, you really did. I mean, you mentioned places in there for ice cream and hot dogs and pizza that really exist, and you caress the things about Detroit and the surrounding areas. And was that did you have to do a little research, or were these just places you remember from your past?
At the beginning, I couldn't remember everything, but the more you start to dive in, right, memories emerge. You can actually feel like you can get the map of your town. I mean, I haven't been there in a decade now or more. I mean, my parents moved away many years ago. So, but I could still map it out in my head. And I started to think of, it was actually very useful because I must admit, I couldn't wait to leave my hometown. I needed it growing up. I felt very much like I didn't belong for all the reasons. But I was surprised how nostalgic it made me, not for the narrow-minded people that were certainly there then, very conservative place, but for some of the memories and some of these old mom and pop shops, and certainly for Detroit, which has had this great revival in recent years, but was really in bad shape through my childhood. And it felt like it had just been much like some of these women, exploited and left and abandoned. So I think all that started to vibrate through the more I wrote, and it became much more, as you say, of a love story there.
Well, and it was really interesting. I happen to like Detroit. I had a good time there.
Good.
So it's a lot of fun. And as you say, Detroit's a lot like Baltimore and Philadelphia, New York to some extent. There's a lot of mom and pop. There's a lot of homemade restaurants and bars and stuff.
Yes.
And so you feel very neighborhoody when you go to Detroit, or at least I did anyway. So I enjoyed it a great deal.
Yes, no, and I think it's sort of, in some ways, a harsh. There's sort of that lost America where that used to be the norm, right? And that, and somehow now with everything is a chain, and 5 companies run the whole country, and I think there's a lot of feeling for that, that the individuality of places that made them so special. So I think there is a kind of lost America longing, I think, that in the book too, of what we have lost in all this, in late stage capitalism.
Well, I totally agree with you. So I love asking goofy questions. So did you have a favorite bar or restaurant in Detroit?
In Detroit itself, yes, I don't think it's still there because it was a troublesome spot. But when I was young, we used to go into the city it was called the State Bar, and it was a dive of dives. So we could go there when we were not legal age, of course.
Right. There's one of those in every city.
Yes. And there were clubs I used to love to go to, the Shelter and St. Andrews, these sort of music places, but the State Bar I would only ever go to when my brother was with me, because you needed some protection, because once I went into the restroom, when I came out, my brother said that some guy at the bar had offered him $50 for me. I thought my brother was going to punch this guy. I thought we should leave now, but I have a soft spot for it because I do like a dive bar, and there was some real they weren't all that creepy. There were some real characters there, so it was a favorite of mine. And I don't think it's still there. Detroit's really spiffing itself up, but
yeah, but you know what? It's those places that we have these memories about that always just warm my heart. It's like sometimes you go somewhere and you're like, oh my gosh, I had such a good time. And it can be like seedy or trashy, but sometimes you have a good time. That's all that matters. So.
Absolutely. And there's just so much character in those old beaten up places.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, the book is called El Dorado Drive. It's by Megan Abbott. It is so delicious and so wonderful. Thank you, Megan, for being a guest.
Oh, it was so much my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at outwithdan, and on Instagram and Facebook at Go Out with Dan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.